So, chapter 6 is kind of like a puzzle box. As opposed to the other chapters that have one guiding thing, one event that happens that like pushes it for purpose. Chapter 6 presents a bunch of pieces and kind of expects you as the reader to put it together to understand the point, because he definitely has a conclusion to it. He opens the chapter with Gatsby's background, and Nick specifically tells you, I'm telling you this information out of order. Nick won't hear Gatsby's real background until chapter 8. Once he watches everything get destroyed in chapter 7, Gatsby finally is willing to open up and tell Nick the truth about himself. But Nick says, you kind of need to know this stuff now before we get to chapter 7. And rightly so. It gives us a better impression of who Gatsby is, but it's also important for this context. What are some of the things we find out about Jay Gatsby? So is that his real name? No. So we get this bit that his real name is James Gatz. Where's he from? You don't have to know this off the top of your head. You can get your book. It's okay. So this is page 98 where we start that process of revealing things. He's from North Dakota. This will be important a little bit later when Nick starts to put some pieces together and get some stuff. We get this whole thing through page 98 and 99 about how James Gatz was a poor, kind of working stiff. He bounced from jobs to job. He didn't have anything. And what creates this idea of Jay Gatsby is that he sees a boat that is owned by Dan Cody. We brought Dan Cody up before. Gatsby recognizes that it's going to hit the shoreline and hit some rocks, so he swims out. He gives this guy this bit of advice, and then introducing himself, he reinvents himself into Jay Gatsby. And there are some quotes here that stand out about that. On 98, he says, the truth was that Jay Gatsby of West Egg, Long Island, sprang from his platonic conception of himself. He was a son of God, a phrase which, if it means anything, means just that. And he must be about his father's business, the service of a vast, vulgar, and meretricious beauty. So he invented just the sort of Jay Gatsby that a 17-year-old boy would be likely to invent. And to this conception, he was faithful to the end. Imagine what you, right now in your life, imagine a rich, successful adult to be like. How do they act? How do they spend their money? What are the things that they want? And to Nick, he goes, oh, now Jay Gatsby makes perfect sense to me. He's a 17-year-old's version of what a rich guy is. He spends his money on everybody. He throws huge parties. He just has lots of stuff, lots of clothes. He's like, that makes sense. He also gives us on 99 this bit about how Gatsby in this time of transition was always in what he says is a constant and turbulent riot. This is the whole first paragraph on 99. He ends up ending it with this phrase. He says, for a while, these revelries provided an outlet for his imagination. They were a satisfactory hint of the unreality of reality, a promise that the rock of the world was founded securely on a fairy's wings. Okay, so think for a second with me. James Gatz, poor kid, reinvents himself into Jay Gatsby. He's able to do it. Are fairies real? No, I'm sorry if that totally destroys your whole worldview. And now you're like, oh no, don't tell me about Santa or the Easter Bunny. Fairies aren't real, but here, notice that they give this idea of the unreality of reality. That the rock of the world, the physical manifestation of the world that we live in, is founded on a fairy's wings, on fairy tale. That there's a certain unreality to reality. Remember in 1920, Social Security numbers weren't a big deal. You didn't need to have certain pieces of identification to do stuff. You literally could roll into a new situation and say this is your name, and everybody would be like, all right, cool. You could roll in to get a driver's license, and they'd be like, hey, what's your name? And you could tell them whatever you want. And guess what? They're going to give you an ID with that name on it. And so for Jay Gatsby, he's realizing this idea in this reinvention. Think about how that affects the Jay Gatsby we see in the present. What does he think he can do? By this point, by chapter 6, even chapter 7, what does Gatsby envision that he is going to be able to do in this situation? Of the book with Daisy. What does Jay Gatsby envision that his life is going to be like now that Daisy's there? Like, what does he think he can do?
Oh, that Daisy will just leave everything and do with him.
We know that that's unrealistic. Gatsby also expects, and chapter 6 gets into this at parts towards the end, that that they're going to go back to Louisville. They're going to get married at her parents' house. He doesn't understand that she is not Daisy Faye, the girl he knew years ago. He still thinks that that's who he's talking to. So this idea of being able to reinvent himself has infected his mindset. It's why he's stuck in the past. It's why he thinks that he can do these things. They're not going to happen. We get to part 2, which is this scene where Nick is over at Gatsby's and all of a sudden Tom and these other people show up. And how do they show up?
They're just out
Riding what? Horses. Gatsby puts on a show. He wants to be genial. He wants to be a host. But do these people want drinks from him? Do they want to hang around with him?
No.
Not at all, because these are people from East Egg that are friends of Tom's, and they know Gatsby's reputation, and they don't really want anything to do with him. And when somebody casually invites him to go to dinner, what does he have to go get? He says he doesn't have a horse, so how is he going to go? In a car, okay? Now, when we started the book, we said that people that live in East Egg tend to be what we call old money. They've always had their riches. It's part of their legacy. People that live in West Egg, where Gatsby is, are people that are new money. They've gotten it in their lifetime. Which of these forms of transportation is old? Do they want to hang around with the guy from West Egg who's new money? Where's Daisy fall? New money or old money? So even though this is a social situation that doesn't involve her, part 1 tells us that Gatsby is new money. Part 2 shows us that, hey, old money and new money, they don't get along at all. And so you're starting to go, huh. Then we have this party, the first one that Tom and Daisy come to. Gatsby always introduces Tom as the polo player. Tom is seemingly, it's like a compliment to him. He's like, oh, well, yeah. But is it a compliment from Jay Gatsby's part, or is he trying to make fun of him? What do you have to play polo? A horse. So we bring down some of these ideas about old money still. It's just a reminder. We notice that the West Egg people and the East Egg people don't really mix at Gatsby's parties. And it's part of why Daisy doesn't have a good time. These people from West Egg they're real. They show their emotions, and it disgusts her a little bit. She's a little put off by it. We see that specifically in this movie director and the star. Now, in Fitzgerald's first draft of the novel, titled Trimalchio, that movie director and the star are all the way back at the first party in chapter 3. But when he revised the novel, he moved them here. Because what we see between the two of them is this slow connection to finally kiss towards the end of the night. There's a hesitancy to the action. There's a legitimacy to their emotions. But hey, what's Daisy doing this whole party? Yeah, she's making out with Gatsby at Nick's house, and Nick has to be like the lookout while they're making out over there on the porch. She even hands Tom that gold pencil at one point. And then later she mentions that the girl that Tom is talking to is common but pretty. That gold pencil is basically like a free pass. Like, here, write down any phone numbers of girls that you meet so that I can go cheat with my boyfriend over here. Okay, we get all of these pieces because what we end up with is a clear impression that Gatsby is new money, that old money and new money don't mix, that Daisy is totally turned off by the raw emotions of those that are new money. So that at the end of the party, in that last sequence, when Nick is alone with Gatsby, we're going to go and look at the bottom of page 109. Nick undercuts again this idea that what Gatsby expects is that Daisy is going to look at Tom and say, I never loved you. Impossible. She does love him. But to Gatsby, she can't. Like, she loves me. Like, you can't love two people. Doesn't exist that way. And at the bottom of the page, as he's contemplating this, Gatsby walks down a desolate path of fruit rinds and discarded favors and crushed flowers. Well, if you go back and you look at the ideas from the beginning of chapter 3, when they talk about the Gatsby party, all the decorations, all the fruit that's brought in, right? We get all these details early so that here we see that Gatsby is walking on a path of trash from the party. Hey, why did he have all these parties? What was the whole purpose of having these big parties that are so over the top? So Daisy would find her way there and she would be impressed. Has it worked? Gatsby is literally walking on his broken and shattered dreams here. And then we follow that up on 110 with Nick's honest assessment of the situation. He says, dude, you can't expect much of her. You can't repeat the past. And then Gatsby looks at him and with every bit of a genuine nature says, yes, you can. In Gatsby's mind, he believes in the unreality of reality. The fact that I reinvented myself and it worked. So clearly I can do this. Chapter 7 shows us, no, you can't. Because when it gets put to it, Daisy backs out. Are you now able to see a little bit better how chapter 6 works? It leads us to that conclusion, but it's only because you kind of do the calculus here to see it. Now, the other part that everybody gets super confused by and they don't know what to do with. In chapter 7, Nick says it's his birthday. And everybody's always like, what? How is it? How at the end of the day do you just all of a sudden go, oh, by the way, it's my birthday? People think Nick is dumb, or they think that Nick is like so oblivious. No. How old is Nick turning? 30. There's a big deal in turning 30. Because all of a sudden, everybody expects you to be an adult and have your stuff together. And Nick doesn't. And he's kind of realizing it, especially as he watches these people he spent the whole summer with, like, circle the drain in this incident at the hotel. Nothing is together in his life. And so as he, like, thinks about this moment as they're going back, he talks about how he's basically, like, moving forward towards death. He gets really despairing for a minute because it's just like, oh my God, today's my birthday, but I don't want to spend my birthday like this. Like, this is absurd. This is ridiculous. Like, oh my God. And plus, it helps to underscore the fact that Nick is like wallpaper. This book isn't about Nick yet. It will be, kind of. But this book is more driven by him watching everybody else spiral out around him. Any other questions from the quiz that maybe we need to address or answer quickly? We will come back to it, I promise. There's a lot here that we can still dig out and talk about. We didn't even talk about the fact that, Myrtle gets her chest ripped open when she gets hit by a car. Yeah, you didn't catch that? Like when they find her, they say that her breast like flaps there because I mean, we're talking these are solid steel roadsters that she gets hit by. So when she gets hit, like this also helps to underscore how big Myrtle is. Like she dents the car. So it's not like a plastic car like we have today. Like these are some metal cars. So she puts a dent into Gatsby's car. So her death is violent. It is there. And you know, he talks about her chest is ripped open. There's like cracks around her mouth, cuts and everything. If you go back and you look at Myrtle's description in chapter 2, we said she offsets her husband. Her husband is like he's dead. He's like a ghost. But she is almost on fire with life. Imagine that at this moment here, it's like the life bursts out of her. It bursts out of her chest. It bursts out of her mouth in this final like bit. And so it's this violent, gross, bloody death that we're going to have to deal with. And of course, notice the impact on Tom. You know, Tom is shook at this thing. More so than he was shook that he, you know, put the pieces together today that, oh, my wife is cheating on me. Oh, and she's cheating with this guy. And oh, I'm gonna watch the whole thing burn around me. He's more shook by my girlfriend got hit by a car and is dead. So next week, we will continue